はい、おはようございます。本日もHoudini朝の作業配信を始めていきたいと思います。ちょっと昨日はもう朝頭がめちゃくちゃ痛くて全然動けなかったので、ちょっとお休みしてました。今日はだいぶ良くなったので、今日からまたやっていきたいと思ってます。今日は以前やったちょっとドーナツのチュートリアルがあるんですけど、なんかもうちょっと複雑な形状のドーナツを作るやつがあったので、そっちをやってみようかなと思います。はい。では、動画を流します。
Magnus, and in this tutorial we are going to create a donut in
こんな
Houdini.
ちょっと込み入った
So let's start off
や
with
つ
a
です。
geonode and call it 01.
では、Houdiniを立ち上げていきます。今回もバージョンが 18. 間違えたかな。こっちか。はい。今回のバージョンも 18.5 でやっていきます。で、デスクトップは標準のビルドです。はい。よいしょ。後にジオメトリーノードを作ります。今回はちょっと通りやってみようかな。
Body. Dive inside by double clicking and create a torus. Now the torus, we can play around with its radii and also its resolution. And I turned this up quite a bit and try to make it look quadratic, more or less. These kinds of polygons. And we can use a mountain stop to make the surface more irregular. Now let's lower the number of octaves so it's not too high frequent, and if you're unhappy with the scale of this effect, you can change it from very low to very high. And you can get lots of variations by middle mouse clicking and just offsetting this. But I like the original shape. Alright, next we will just make sure it's sitting right on the floor. So you can use an expression called minus $ymin. So ymin is the lowest point of our geometry, and by minus we're pushing it upwards, so it's sitting right on the floor. So in order to refer to this state later, we can define a null, call it out. Now press L to sort it and spacebar H to get the central view, and use U to go out. And now we're creating a new geonode, this time called chocolate. Inside, we want to refer to the old node, and by clicking on this icon we can go to the old out. And before we can apply any chocolate layer, we first want to create a mask for it. So create a point warp, call it mask, and dive inside. Now a point warp looks quite intimidating at first, but in procedural modeling, it's mostly about its point positions and its normals. In this case, we use the dot product of the normal against an up vector. And just to visualize this, you can connect this to the color. So you see a gradient from -1 to 1.
なんかおかしいな。ここで体下の下が黒くならないとおかしい。あ、フラグ立ってねえじゃねえかよ。あれでもおかしいな。なんでだ。ノーマルからドット取ったな。あれなんで下黒にならねえのこれ。これおかしい。ジオメトリーモップが 1.0 かもしかして。いや違うな。これは何かおかしいな。
And just a product of the normal against an up vector. And just to visualize this, you can connect this to the
アップベクターにドット取って CD に突っ込んだらここ黒にならないとおかしくね。なぜだ。ジオメトリースプレッドシート出すか。マイナス値は出てるけど。じゃあこれ。何かおかしい気がする。まあいいか。
the color. So you see a gradient from -1 to 1. And because we don't want negative values, we just clamp them.
やっぱマイナス出てねえとおかしいんだよな。値が。なんかでもマイナス出てんな。なんでだ。
So now it's stuck between 0 and 1. And we didn't want to create any colors, so let's just press Y to cut this off again. But instead we want to export an attribute called density. And this density will be used by the scatter node. So by standard, the scatter node is doing a fairly uniform, and this density called density. And this density will be used by the scatter node. So by standard, the scatter node is doing a fairly uniform distribution of points, but we can change this by activating density. Next, we don't want to force a total count, but rather
そういうことか。チェックしよう。余計なオブジェクトが出てたのか。通りでおかしいと思った。そうだよね。これで上半分になる。
a density scale. So this relates to the area size. And also we don't want the relaxing.
これがあるか、デンシティでコントロールできるようになるのか。
To be too regular, so we can play around with this until it's looking more natural, and we can go always back to this later, but now let's just test what it looks like when we create a volume based off of these points. So VDB from particles will translate this into a vector field, which looks quite blobby at first. But let's up the resolution and decrease the point radius scale to 0.04 or maybe 6. And you can even give this maybe a bit a larger radii, and to get rid of this blobby look you can smooth this quite a bit. So by increasing the radius and possibly playing around with iterations you can get various results. And this would be a thick layer of chocolate. And again, please make sure you play around with density scale, with the point radius scale. If you like with the overall resolution, you can go down to 001, but this shows the blobs a bit more, so I like a little rough resolution. And we will create two branches out of this. The first one will be the volume, so we just write out volume, and the other variant will be a mesh. So in order to turn this into a mesh, we convert it back to polygons. Now this is our chocolate layer. Layer. Again, if you feel like this could be smoother, just make sure you play around with these or use a different algorithm. This looks quite nice actually. Okay, let's go out with you, and now we want to create a new node called Geo, but we rename it to sticks. Now before we dive in there, let's go back to chocolate and steal the mask node, because this is quite useful. Let's copy this, go into sticks, and after merging with the latest out mesh, we just paste this mask and we already have the top.
単純なボットを引っ張るだけか。メッシュを持ってきて。なるほど。
Again, masked. If you want to see it again, it's working like this. So the bottom sides don't get any values, but the top ones get rather high ones. So we can now scatter our sticks on there. So again, using density, and we just say scatter. Now again, we don't need a total count. We rather work with density, but that's up to you. And the relaxed iterations can be kept like this because you don't necessarily want to those things to intersect. But which is really vital, make sure to use the density attribute. Okay, now what's missing is some normal directions. So when you look at this surface, we of course have some implicit normals, but we can make them explicit by just saying normal and switching these to points. That way, if we look at the scattered points, they have the normals too. And these normals can be used to place sticks on them. So let's just create a line.
あれ上まで出てる。あ、いいのか。ここで。間違えた。こっちだっけ。いや。ああ、そっか。こっちか。ボケてた。あ、これでいいのか。
And copy these to the points. Now you'll see that these kind of lines do all sorts of weird things. Their orientation is not really what we like. And we can of course change their direction here. So now they stick in the air like hair. But instead we want to control their direction with a custom normal. So first of all, let's do something rather simple. Let's create an attribute randomize. And you see here it creates unique colors for each point. But we rather would like to define a random scale, which is just has one component. And we want this to be, well, half the size or the full size, something in between. And the global scale is probably easier to control. So these will be the sugar sticks on top. And now how can we make sure that this is not standing right on the surface, but rather lying? And this is where a bit of mathematics can help us. So we will just use another point VOP and just create a cross product of the normal. So take the normal, say cross, and instead of using this up vector, we will create a random vector based off the point number. So this would be a normal, and the cross product will create a perpendicular line all around. the normal vector, this up vector, we will create a random
ベクターと、
vector based
アップベクターとクロス取ろうとしてんだよね。ノーマルとアップベクターでクロス取るから、ここに沿わせたいってことか。ランダムはサイズをランダムにしたいのかな。
based of the point number, so this would be a normal, and the cross product will create a
バージョン違うの？なんであんなに数多いの？少ないんだ。ポイントなんからランダム作って、はいはいはい。デザインプットで 3D ノーマルつくんだよね。
perpendicular line all around these normals, so you would just stick this there and you see all of a sudden these kind of sticks lay flat on the ground. Now what's the problem with this? The problem is that the random value we get here is always between 0 and 1, and this is why all these sticks point to a half of the direction. If you really want random directions, you should fit this value from 0 to 1 to minus 1 to positive 1. This is truly random directions lying directly on the surface. Now let's leave this and just call this
ここがバラバラになるのか。
normals on the surface, positive 1. This is truly random directions lying directly on the surface.
ああ、そうか。クロスの計算する向きを逆にしたいってことか。
Now let's leave this and just call this normals. The randomization is basically creating p-scale. It's just better to name those to keep the overview. And of course the density seems a bit high, so we can just reduce this and until there are hardly any collisions left. Right, next we want to just blend all the other geometries out and really focus on our little sticks here. These are of course too straight, so we would resample them to give them more points. Just look inside the point view and you should find a good value depending on the length. I want a few points on those lines, and we can just jitter them. And you'd find a good value depending on the length. I want a few points on those lines, and we can just jitter them. Jittering is giving each point a random offset. Should be really tiny, maybe 0.02, and these maybe a bit more. And these can be resampled again to have really smooth subdivisions. So 0.01 or maybe 0.02 will give us these kind of noodle-ish looks. And in order to give them random colors, We can also go back to the point branch and here just say attribute randomize, and this is giving random colors. But the problem with randomness is that it's not controlled, at least not now. So let's do something more clever. Let's delete the random node and create another point op, which we will call color. Now inside we again create a random value based off the number, the point number. And instead of just feeding this into color, we use something called a ramp parameter. And this way we get more control over the color output. Let's go up and now turn these colors into constants. This one as well. So this way we get more control over the color output. Let's go up and now turn these colors into constants. This one as well. And now you can basically define your own colors for the sticks. So lots of white ones means moving the slider to the left, and then you can just define your very own color palette. Alright, so these would be the colors that can basically appear. And now in order to turn this into a solid geometry, like a closed mesh, you can just use the poly wire. And the poly wire can do little worms out of this. And you should always take care of the mesh. So let's activate the wireframe view and give 8 subdivisions, which is way better for subdividing those sticks. Alright. So this looks rather nice. You can of course optimize this if needed, and maybe spend a little more of those. If you're unhappy with the distribution, just change the seed value. You probably know this. And now let's really go out, but only after we set another out node. If if you're unhappy with the distribution, just change the seed value. You probably know this. And now let's really go out, but only after we set another out node. Great, so these are the sticks. Now, how can we make the sticks and the chocolate layer interact? Because usually the chocolate will get some dents here. So we create another geo node and this time call it 04 choco dents. So inside we refer again to the chocolate layer, but this time it's volume. So out volume is correct, and we will also need the sticks. So let's grab those. So there should be sticks out, and these need to be converted into volumes. So VDB from polygons should do it.
埋めるのかな。
This time make sure it's really high resolution, so 0.01, and this volume can be I think resampled. So let's look at VDB resample, and we will match it to this one, so they have now the same resolution. If I would change these, this one would take it over. Now we change these, so they have, and we will. So let's look at VDB resample, and we will match it to this one.
VDB かな。あ、そっか、トランスフォームリファレンス VDB だから。こっちの VDB を使ってリサンプルするってことか。
So they have now the same resolution. If I would change these, this one would take it over. Now we can combine these. This is a bit like a Boolean operator. So put both in, and now we just say, I would like to.
使い方がわからんな。
Okay, this would have done also the resampling. A to match B, then we don't need this. And now we can say we would like to use a different operation, namely SDF difference.
おおなるほど。オペレーションが SDF のボリュームの差分を取ってんのか。
which now puts holes where those sticks are. Now let's say we want to increase the distance a little. We can use the VDB reshape SDF and just make them a bit thicker. You can tell already that this is influencing the size. So let's just keep this rather small. We just want a subtle effect. And also smooth the overall shape. VDB smooth. At least for testing we can see whether this looks good or not. So a few iterations to make it look a bit smoother. We can also see how it turns out if we reference it the other way around. And now let's convert this to a mesh. So to polygons. And this looks very, very sharp, but we have to see it in conjunction, so maybe it looks more convincing with the sticks on it. And now it's time to deactivate the original chocolate layer. And I find this way too strict, so we need more, we don't need smoothing, and let's see how this works. This looks better, but I think we don't need smoothing, and let's see how this works.
スムース入れたから形状変わっちゃったの。なるほど。これもぴったりくるのか。うん。いいね。
This looks better, but I think it could be smoother. So let's just see what we can do here by increasing the offset. And if we smooth, we should do so with a slight bigger radius. This is shrinking too much, so maybe let's try a different algorithm. Okay, this is even worse. Let's look at this again. And yeah, this really feels like it's sunk into the chocolate. And if you're unhappy with it, you at least know which sliders to play around with. And also there's still another possibility, if you think this is rather to be solved on polygon level, there's also a smooth node which we can always use to smoothen up the geometry a bit more. Maybe like this. Great. So this would be our chocolate layer. And now one thing.
飯になってないのか、これどういうことだ。これ何マーク。こいつがおかしい。こいつ表示しちゃダメじゃね。うん。はいはい。こういうことか。
Thing we shouldn't forget about is the floor. So 0, 0 floor is just a really large circle, or rather a disk. We can make it 100 units and append an out node. So maybe we can do something. We can make it 100 units and append an out node. So maybe we can do something with this as well. So let's think about scattering some sticks on the floor, but before that, let's just say I would like to see this procedural donut right after saving with, let's say, something with this 100 units.
プレーンが逆、あれか。XY になってんの。こうか。で、OK。
And append an out node. So maybe we can do something with this as well. So let's think about scattering some sticks on the floor, but before that, let's just say I would like to see this procedural donut right after saving with bigger sticks. So we can just leave our view here and go into sticks and say, what would this look like with a few more millimeters? Maybe like this, or maybe like 0.02. That looks better. And then we could just smoothen the dents a little more. But you know what, it's okay. So now how could we put some sticks on the floor as well? So this shouldn't be too hard, right? You just go to the sticks up here and merge the circle. apply a normal just to make sure. Yeah, so it's good that we saved just at the right time.
落ちた。
Normal, just and merge the circle. Apply a normal just to make sure. A normal just to make sure.
落ちたんだ。唐突に落ちんじゃん。
Yeah, so it's good that we saved just at the right time. Maybe do something a little different so it doesn't crash again. So let's put this to polygon. Look at everything in conjunction.
ああ、これこうにしてたかな。これがプリミティブだったから落ちたの。そんなことある。
And let's not make it that huge. Give it a bit of resolution.
落ちる前に何しようとしてたんだ。
Apply a normal just to make sure.
ノーマルをセットしてた。
Yeah, so it's good that we saved just at the right time. Maybe do something a little different so it doesn't crash again. So let's put this to polygon. Look at everything in conjunction. And let's not make it that huge. Give it a bit of resolution. And reverse it because now it's a polygon structure.
日本スケールでかすぎた。
And reverse it because now it's a polygon structure. Okay, again into sticks. Like solution.
何やってるかわかんねえな。
And reverse it because now it's a
リバース。リバースって何？違う。ああ、なるほど。
polygon structure. Okay, again into sticks. Now let's just merge this. Take the floor and just hold down Alt to copy the normals. And what we can do now is we can also scatter some points here. Really without relaxing them too much. And too much. What we can do now is we can also scatter some points here. Really without relaxing them too much. And then we just merge it before we go on. So we take both scatters and just bring them there. So this seems to So this seems to So this seems to
これ何やってたんだっけ。ああ、そういうことか。じゃあ今これ上向いてるってことか。ああ、そういうことか。デンシティがねえのか。まあいいや。
brings quite a bit of calculation inside. But look at this, isn't that fantastic? Now we really have this going on everywhere. So not much work and quite some effect. We can also increase the circle, but then we just have to make or take into consideration that it's calculating a bit. And also just to make sure, we could also lift these points slightly because they are a bit sticking in the floor, and I wouldn't necessarily want this, so you could just say, let's cheat a little and lift them up. And by the way, if you want to avoid long calculations, just switch it to manual for the time being. Correct this by, if at all, a centimeter.
何したの今。
Correct, just switch it and lift them up. And by the way, if you want to avoid long calculations, just
オートアップデートだと、あれか。重いから挟む前にマニュアル入れろ、マニュアルにしとけみたいなことか。
switch it to manual for the time being.
で、変える前に変えとけってこと。
Correct this by, if at all, a centimeter. Yeah, it's a little better. And then go out.
固まっちゃうのか。こうしないと。なるほど。ちょっとだけ上にしたってこと。あ、確かに固まる。ここを変えると一回一通りもう一回処理が走るってことか。
Alright, let's save it again. And now for illuminating this, I use an environment, and I guess a HDRI should bring fast results. So we can pick one of these and just create a mantra PBR node, set up a camera, lock it, and
聞いてるこれ、エンバイラメントライト。
PBR node, set up a camera, lock it, and give it at least 80 millimeters, I'd say. Zoom out a little, move out, and then we can do our first test rendering. Lock it a mantra PBR node, set up a camera.
本当の PBR ってここから作れないんだっけ？
Lock it and give it at least 80 millimeters, I'd say. Zoom out a little, move out, and then we can do our first test rendering. I think we will lower the resolution to half and just hit render for seeing a result. And yeah, this should be it. Looks rather funny because it's so regular. Okay, this looks really dramatic, but I don't really mind. And don't relax it. And now we can just go to the
PBR か。違うのにしてみるか。ちょっと明るすぎるな。いや、HD 払いがねえな。
material context and just give it some material. Don't relax. That's it. And now we can just go to the material context and just give it some new materials. So we can use the principled shader and don't use the point colors for the chocolate. And maybe there's a chocolate actually. Let's use milk chocolate and use the principled shader and don't use the point colors for the chocolate. And maybe there's a chocolate actually. Let's use milk chocolate. And apply this to chocolate. In order to raise the quality, you can also set the chocolate to render polygons that subdivide. Vision. And next would be the body or the sticks. So let's go on with the sticks. So another principled shader. This time we are going to use the point color. Just make sure to put the base color to 1 so they don't get tinted. And we can make them rather reflective, I think. And maybe not that reflective, not too rough, not too reflective. Let's just see what this looks like. Too rough, not too reflective. Let's just see what this looks like. And just apply the sticks material to the sticks. Now the chocolate is of course not active, so we kind of can get rid of this. What I meant was the chalk dents, and those can also be subdivided again. So while this is calculating, we can also give a material to the body, and for this to work nicely we can also apply a bit of a color gradient here. So let's just leave the rendering alone for the time being. And go back to our body, and inside there we can just apply a custom gradient. So point warp. Let's switch to scene view, and now we can just have a look at just the donut alone. call this color and grab the bounding box. So it's called relative to bounding box based on the world position. And this will look like this. We only want the gradient. The second vector component basically is going from gradient. The second vector component basically is the second vector component basically is going from down to top, from bottom to top, and this can be used to again apply a ramp parameter, which is called color. Now, if you like, you can just tint the donut and make it dark on the picture. Now, if you like, you can just tint the donut and make it dark on the bottom, brighter on top, and darker here. And there are a number of sliders for really giving this the desired look. It shouldn't be all white, of course, but you can be the artist here. I will just show you the concept. Maybe something like this looks a little more convincing than
しまった。レイヤーを間違えた。
a pure white color. And this should also be visible in
表示邪魔だな。これ消せないんだっけ？
rendering, so we can create another principled shader, which this time is again set to all ones in the base color using point color. This time it should be very rough, not really reflective. One this time is again set to all ones in the base color using point color. This time it should be very rough, not really reflective. And we also apply this one called body and move it on top of the body node. Now, of course, you can also give the floor a nice shader.
今ミスった。手が滑った。今もしかして。やっぱり手が滑ってた。
Maybe we make it pure white, so principled shader core is, because we don't need the presets, wouldn't want to go all white, so it's not getting too bright. Maybe use metallic. Principled shader core is, because we don't need the presets, wouldn't want to go all white, so it's not getting too bright. Maybe use metallic and call this floor. So as soon as we applied this to the floor, we should see some changes here. Let's hit render. And we can also activate a bit of depth by going to the mantra node. We can say we would like to have under rendering depth of field.
Depth of field. なんかそんなパラメータ入れてたっけ
Under rendering depth of field, and now we only need to tell the camera to please. Okay, this is due to the metallic. To please just give us some depth of field effect. So you would just go here, and I personally like to look at this in scene view because there's a interesting way of cutting off everything we see in the far clipping, and as soon as things appear again, there you see where it's being cut off, and I want the sharpness to be round about here, maybe 8.5, and we can just say, okay, focus distance would be 8.5.
クリッピングを手前にして、消えるが。
And weこんなもんか。 5 and we can just say, okay, focus distance would be 8.5 to get started and a really shallow f-stop. Now let's see what this looks like when we render this out again. Alright, now this is the result.
フィールドがうまくいってねえな、これ。削ってみるか。まあ、こんなもんか。はい。一旦、こんな、肝心な、できました。はい。結構今回なんかボリューム使ったりとか、ボリュームの扱いはちょっとあんまり慣れてないので、ちょっとところどころわかんないノードが多かったんですが、まあやっぱボリューム使うと結構ディティール詰めれたりするので、なかなか学びになりました。はい。今日はここまでにします。はい。ご視聴ありがとうございました。